All the time we spent, wonder where it went. Why must time move on? Why must we grow apart?
Hello. We are here again with a little bonus episode. This one about books. How about that? Reading in 2025, even though you're looking at movies. There's a reason. These are just book recommendations that are related to the podcast, things that we have talked about or will talk about. Let's get into it. Doomsday Reader. This is edited by Ted Daniels. It's just a collection of mostly like essays and different documents, different source materials of kind of like different cults and different things throughout history that are kind of related to apocalyptic, end of the world prophecies and whatnot. It's an okay little edited collection. It's not my favorite, but it is fun to flip through every now and then. This is also going to be, should have said beginning, fiction and nonfiction. So that's mostly nonfiction. Here's another nonfiction one that's always helpful. This is the Encyclopedia of Apocalyptic Literature, which is exactly what it says it is. It's not really a text to read, but it does have a large collection of I guess source, like a lot, like basically like an encyclopedia, really. I don't know why I'm explaining encyclopedia. You know how a fucking encyclopedia works. But it has a large collection of different kinds of things, mostly literature. There are some things in here that go a little bit off the beaten path at times. But for the most part, it kind of was like, well, here's Siddhartha. Siddhartha connects to this, so on and so forth. A good little place to start if you're trying to look at things of the sort. We'll get to that later, because that's a weird one. But first novel, Cormac McCarthy's The Road. This was actually the first episode of the podcast we did way back in 2020 that never came out because it was like 4 hours long. I was just talking about a book. I didn't think anyone would want to listen to that. I'm probably right. But Cormac McCarthy's The Road, they just turned it into a movie, as it says right there. Or no, that says Pulitzer Prize. I thought it said now a major motion picture. But this is a fantastic book. First off, its writing style is very unique, and it's kind of written in these like very paradoxical sentences where it kind of builds up the tension right from the beginning, and it's this kind of slow building relationship between a father and a son, and it's very, 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 very well done, and I'm not the biggest fan of the end of it, but I like the rest of it. Next on our list here is another novel, Station 11. They turned this into a TV show. I also really like this one. This is set in Michigan, and it's similar. It's about like a plague that takes over the world and starts killing everybody. But this is, once again, kind of like a more nuanced take on that you can probably find in some of the more talented writers of the time. And I think it's a good book. Nonfiction, returning to nonfiction. We've talked about this on the podcast. There's actually a second edition of this that came out that I need to get, and this is one of my favorites. This is just World Gone Wild, a survivor's guide to post-apocalyptic movies. This has a lot of the stuff that we have talked about, we will talk about. I don't read it for like, hey, this is what I want to talk about. I read it more for finding movies to talk about. Like ones that's like, oh, well, we haven't talked about that yet, but we could talk about that one day. Right? Like The Monsters, The Waiting Game. Never heard of that movie before. Well, hey, now there's something to look up to find something to add to the show topic list. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about is actually not in here, so it's not a comprehensive list. But it does have a lot of books, and there's a new edition of it, which just, like I said, came out recently. Another collection. This is The Ultimate Guide to Zombie Movies. Not post-apocalyptic, but a lot of zombie movies are post-apocalyptic, and so this just kind of goes into a lot of information about a lot of those movies. Very helpful whenever we're looking at anything zombie related, which we have before and we will in the future. continuing on. Got a few more to look at. This is more, a little bit more nonfiction, but once again, a little bit more scholarly focused. Apocalyptic Patterns in 20th Century Fiction by David Lay. This is from Notre Dame Press, and this says, made a major contribution to the understanding of apocalyptic tradition in 20th century fiction. Along the way, leads us to a remarkable array of fiction, from science fiction to literature of death to specific African-American works, such as Frederick Douglass' narrative, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, and examples of post-colonial fiction, such as Solomon Rushdie's Midnight Children and Deep River. It's required students reading for students interested in the connections between religion and literature. There you go. That tells you everything you need to know about it right there. It is a very, very good idea. And I love that I think I could be this one or the other one that we're going to talk about in a second. It does a really good job of connecting the colonialism narrative with the apocalyptic narrative, especially the aliens invading. And, if you think about it, like, let's use France and England, for example, their invasion of Africa and their colonialization of that country could largely be considered an apocalyptic narrative for that civilization and culture, because and effectively it ended, except for the small little pieces of survivors that stuck behind. So kind of an interesting take on it, which gets us to our next one, which is After the End by James Berger. This is Representations of the Post-Apocalypse. And this one is from, is this North Carolina? University of Minnesota Prep. I couldn't remember. This one also is an interesting book. Here's a review of it. Berger provides uncustomary ways to think about cultural responses to the turn of the millennium, presenting a voice of analytical wisdom that will help temper the noisy hype being surrounded as we approach the year 2000. So that gives you some idea of how old this book is, but a wonderful book nonetheless. After the End. So After the End kind of takes like the idea of the apocalypse and applies it almost to the personal, where different things can be considered apocalyptic within a person's life. This book, I think, is my contribution to that point, in so much as that this book is not necessarily about the apocalypse, but it is about one man's apocalypse, as it is the story of a man's slow descent into his own mind as he begins to struggle with the ability to remember things, as he's just writing down things that he's reading. And then intermixed is it's a very sad book. Intermixed is his own personal narrative mixed in with these facts about different authors and encyclopedic facts almost. And so mixed in with like philosophical truths. So for example, we have Paradise Lost sold fewer than 300 copies a year in its first 10 years in print. The Courtship of Miles Standfish sold 15,000 copies on its first day. There is no place to be found except in the woods, said Michelangelo. It's kind of like that kind of a style. I really love this book. It is very, very sad to read. And it's basically like an elderly writer who's just called the author, as he's going through a box of things, notes and writings that he wrote down, and intermixed is kind of like his own slow decay into dementia, basically. And it's a very heartfelt book, and kind of like its own personal apocalypse, as you see the slow unraveling of a person's history. Kind of a cool thing. Definitely ties into the After the End thing we talked about. Next up, Apocalypse Culture. This is just a random, weird kind of collection of all kinds of goofy, weird shit throughout history. Some of it safe for work, some of it not safe for work. And it is an odd book. I don't really necessarily reference it very much in the show, but I do like to look at it sometimes, especially when we're going back in time in our time machine and looking at things from a different time period to get some context as to maybe some of the more esoteric things that were happening during some of these periods of time, as it kind of gets into a little bit of different apocalyptic cultures and things of the sort throughout history in its own weird and wacky way. We'll end with 2 novels, and then we'll be done. And then we'll be done talking about books. Lucifer's Hammer. This is a classic sci-fi. I don't think it's ever been turned into a movie, unfortunately. Maybe a TV show. It should be turned into a TV show. But it's in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi book that is a fantastic reading. And I have a really wonderful copy that is getting beaten up over the years, but a really good one. And the last one was turned into a movie that we will one day talk about, On the Beach. Once again, a lovely post-apocalyptic, very short, easy-to-read sci-fi novel. Find you a copy. You can get one at a bookstore for maybe like 50 cents usually. On the Beach. That ends our little book recommendation chart. So there you go. Some books and some recommendations for you who like to read nonfiction and fiction about the end of the world. See you later.